Welcome, everybody, to Cinema Royale. I am Travis Hobson of PunchdrunkCritics.com, and as you can tell from the picture behind me, we are talking Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Joining me to talk about that on this show are Jamie Broadenax from Black Girl Nerds. How you doing, Jamie? Good to have you back.
Good. How are you? Glad to be back.
And the guy, the other person here is Tim Gordon. Tim Gordon, the president of WAFCA and Black Reel Awards, the owner of FilmGordon.com. What's up, Tim?
I love that. He's like, and the other guy. I mean, because you got to come on my show at some point, so it's all right. I'll remember that. Hey, man, I'm happy to be here, man. And also happy because Jamie Broadenax is here. We get to see each other at every film festival. I just never get to do shows with her.
Look at the love fest for Valentine's Day. Isn't this sweet? I wanted to have you both on here to talk about this film because this is the kickoff to Phase 5 for Marvel. And I don't know about the two of you, but I felt that Phase 4 was like a huge letdown. Like, there was not a lot that I really loved about Phase 4 other than Spider-Man No Way Home and maybe Black Panther, which I'm representing in the shirt that I'm wearing today. But because my Ant-Man shirt didn't arrive yet. It arrives tomorrow, conveniently. So whatever. But that's fine. That's a whole other issue. But yeah, Phase 4 I thought was a real letdown. I think that Marvel kind of struggled to weave in not only the big screen films and to establish a new villain and this whole multiverse, but also 8 TV shows that came out during that time. And I think that they kind of got bogged down a little bit and things have been moving kind of slow. And this is the start to Phase 5, the true introduction of Jonathan Majors as Kang. Jamie, I want to start with you. What were your feelings about Ant-Man going into this one?
I thought this movie was okay. It didn't blow me away, but I wasn't disappointed at the same time. I really would have liked more Kang, but I think this is a good warm-up to Phase 5. So I don't think that, Phase 4, I do agree with you. It was a bit disappointing. But hopefully we get some momentum that builds up into Phase 5 going forward. So it's a nice warm-up so far into Phase 5.
Tim, you come at this as more of you don't really read the comics like I do or Jamie does. We kind of had this discussion a little bit last night. Get that look off your face. So I want to get your perspective on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. As someone who's not as familiar with Ant-Man or Kang is a complicated character. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie that is not obvious to someone who may not know the character as much. So what were your feelings about it, coming from that perspective?
Well, a couple of things, Travis. Thank you for having me again. Shaft is a complicated guy. I can't really speak for Kang because I didn't read the comics. Secondly, and I have this conversation literally every time I come out at the screening, and all the nerd critics, you, Julian Lytle, Shireen Nicole, all these folks who are like these, Charles Kirkland, all these comic nerds stand around and y'all all are discussing details and, oh yeah, this is from this book here. And like, as a critic, I swear to you, I've been having this experience for 15 years. I always feel like I watch these movies like missing a huge chunk of like background knowledge on what's going on, right? So like y'all will tell me, oh man, it's all on the screen. No, it's not, because you've read these comics and you know details that I don't know. So I always feel at a disadvantage. But what I felt about this film last night were a couple of things. One, going into any Marvel film, this is now film 31 and the first one of Phase 5. I really have no expectations because I treat the Marvel Cinematic Universe like a huge quilt, right? So I never think of these films, maybe outside of Captain America: Winter Soldier, as anything that's individual, right? I always think of it like a huge universe, and like each film is designed to kind of move the boulder further up the hill to get us inevitably to the story that Marvel wants to tell us, right?
It's almost like a cinematic universe, Tim.
Well, no, I'm just saying it is a universe, but my point is that when I look at them, I don't look at them as individual stories. I'm like, oh, okay, this fits inside the context of where Marvel wants us to go in a particular phase, right? I thought this movie was dark. I mean, it was so dark when the lights came on in the theater. I was like, oh my God, wow. Secondly, I thought, and when I thought it was dark. I thought because as a rule, Ant-Man is usually a lot comic relief.
Yeah,
I think it was a lot of. I mean, they tried to do comic relief in this movie, and I'm still a little ambivalent on how I feel about the movie. But I really didn't walk out of it feeling either way. I mean, I think that Jonathan Majors clearly is the best thing in the film, and I really look forward to
Facts.
him being, quote unquote, the Thanos of Phase 5 and 6. But I don't know, man. Ant-Man, this is probably, like, of all the Ant-Man films, probably the most disappointing one because there's really not a lot of character development outside of Jonathan Majors and Michelle Pfeiffer. The rest of them are just there as kind of set design. Like, they're just a part of the set, but they don't really do anything consequential to really help this movie succeed.
Right. I can see that. I can see that. I think my feelings on it, like, I know I was sitting with two people watching it, and I know that when it was over, it was just sort of like, all right, well, time to go. Which is not the usual reaction from a Marvel movie. It's just like, okay, well, I gotta go see it. It was just kind of like, and I've kind of felt that in the room too, just kind of like, it's over. But I'm a little bit torn because there are aspects of it I like. I really think Jonathan Majors does the best version of Kang. Like, he does, it's the most comics accurate villain I think that Marvel's done so far. Like, he talks like Kang, he acts like Kang, looks like Kang, and Majors really brings this, not just the physical aspect. You can tell that he's still in his 6,000 calorie a day diet on this thing, but but he also brings a certain gravitas that you have to have if you're going to play Kang, who is this character who can see all, do all, knows all, and talks like he knows all. What's up, Tim?
So you're making the point, Jamie. He's making my point. See what I'm talking about? I didn't know anything about Kang. I don't know what Kang's supposed to sound like, what Kang's supposed to look like. How do you expect regular lay people to really understand these films and enjoy these films much in the way that you guys do?
Well, I think
I will say, well, let me jump in really quick because and I'm a comic book fan and I'm a comic book reader, but I actually don't know about Kang in the comics. So, but from what I understood of Jonathan Majors' performance, he did a really good job just playing a villain, period, because he did a great job of playing this very disarming, very trusting character towards Michelle Pfeiffer's role in the film, where you're like, okay, I could see why she had sort of this, like, I guess, partnership a little bit at the beginning with his character, and then she was sort of fooled into becoming, kind of allowing him to unleash this power over her, which allowed him to become who he became. So I understood why he became this menacing character, and he was allowing people to trust him in that way. And that was a very good performance on Jonathan Majors' part. So I don't even think you have to know about comics and understand the background or origin of this character to get that. And that was really great on Jonathan's part. So that was awesome. What's disappointing is we didn't get more of that in the film. Like, Jonathan Majors, he shows up, like, I don't know, a half an hour or even 45 minutes into the movie. So it would have been nice to have seen an origin story of Kang and sort of create a background of his character than to, and I know it's Ant-Man's story and it's Ant-Man and the Wasp, but really sort of get the foundation of who Kang is. And we didn't really get that in this film. So
I feel like this was sort of like, this was just the setup movie. This was a setup movie to the rest of what Phase 5 and Phase 6 is going to be. And I feel like, even as somebody who knows Kang, who Kang is, the only parts of it that I feel like would be completely unreachable for people who don't know Kang came towards the end. which I don't want to spoil for people. But there's stuff that happens at the end with Kang that I think if you don't know who these certain people are at the end of the movie, you'll be like, huh? I don't know what that's about. But it all matters to him. I think it does a pretty good job of setting up who he is. And again, he's another one of these villains, a lot like Thanos, who does not see himself as the villain. He thinks he's doing whatever he feels is right. The way he goes about it is the evil part, but he does not feel like he thinks he's doing it for a purpose. Which I like that aspect. I think Jonathan Majors is really good at getting that kind of character across. I think he's excellent in this. I also like Paul Rudd. Of course, Paul Rudd is fantastic. I can't imagine anybody else playing Scott Lang. But I like the interaction between him and Catherine Newton, who plays Cassie Lang, his daughter, who is now grown up. She's kind of taking on a rebellious spirit. She wants to be a hero like her dad portrays himself to be now that he's helped save the world. I really like those interactions between the two of them. Tim, what do you think about kind of Scott Lang and Cassie together, the whole father-daughter dynamic in the film? Because it's a big part of it.
Well, I thought that their explanation of showing her initially where she is and kind of like the backstory, which they bring back from episode 1 of Ant-Man, to kind of explain her character. I thought that was plausible. That made a lot of sense to me. That she would take on her father's kind of spirit and his kind of drive and desires. I thought that was a surprising part of the story, which didn't necessarily, wasn't necessarily bad. I thought the two of them had some wonderful chemistry together. And but there's some things that happened toward the third act that I'm like, come on, man. Also, and you talk about Kang, and I think either you or Jamie were just talking about how, what Jonathan Majors, the job he did, with this trusting character. I mean, as powerful as Kang is, and I think this is always my issue in all these Marvel kind of cycles when they're creating these villains, right? Sometimes these villains are so powerful. I'm almost as if like, why don't you just, Kang has the ability to do a lot of stuff and could have done it a lot earlier in this movie in order to really get what he wanted. But I guess that's the way the character's kind of designed, much in the same way that I remember watching Endgame and watching how fast they killed Thanos in the first 20 minutes of the film. And I went, we've been watching this thing for 8 years. You could have done that like in any of these other films, but we had to have the buildup. And that's a part of what I talk about with Marvel and the quilt, and how I have to just watch these movies sometimes, listen to you wonderful people who I respect a lot, who had time as children to kind of read these things while I was out playing sports. If I would have known,
shut up, fool. I played football.
Wow, that was shade.
yeah, that was shade. Like people like myself who did real things other than reading comics as kids. If I would have known that this was my life 30 years after being a critic, I surely would have stayed in the house and sequestered myself and read more comics and been more fluent in these subjects. But I'm saying all that to say to your original question that I did not dislike the plot point, and I thought that was one of the things in the film that I thought was plausible and actually sort of worked.
Jamie, I felt like once they get into the quantum realm, they discover, and like I said, I'm not going to try to give away too many spoilers here, but they discover that they're sort of in the middle of a civil war. Basically, you've got Kang on one side. Kang has kind of conquered the quantum realm, and they kind of get involved with this group of rebels. Basically, all that to me felt very familiar. And it didn't. And I was a little bit surprised at how much it felt like not just Empire Strikes Back, but like a little bit of Ready Player One and like all sorts of things that it seemed to be cribbing from. I expected more from Peyton Reed as a director who has always talked about how badly he wants to do a Fantastic Four movie. I thought this would have been like his opportunity to show that off, like what he could have done. I felt like the Quantum Realm didn't really have as much personality as I wanted it to have.
Yeah, in my review that's going to be coming out very shortly, I talk about how it's very heavy-handed with the Star Wars references, and again, I don't want to spoil it as well, but um, luckily Disney owns the properties, the intellectual properties, so they're able to get away with it. But I am surprised. And there's another film which I have not seen, but it was the movie with Gabrielle Union and Jake Gyllenhaal. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? People were saying that it was very similar to that animated film.
Oh, you're talking about
Strange
World?
Strange Worlds. Yeah.
I thought exactly that too. It looked a lot like Strange World in terms of like the creatures and the landscape. And I also compared it to some parts of it to the marketplace scene in Hellboy, the Golden Army.
And then Avatar. People were talking about the Avatar. So it's like and I mean a lot of filmmakers, take in, from other films, and they're influenced by that. I mean, Quentin Tarantino's whole entire career is based off of other filmmakers' IPs. So, but it would have been nice for this to be a little less heavy-handed with the other Space Wars, intergalactic films of the Disney IPs. But that was the thing that kind of bothered me, and I referenced that because I saw parts of like The Mandalorian in there. I even saw like aspects of the Disney World's restaurant bar, Oga's Katina. I saw that in there. So I don't even know if that was it almost felt like it was intentional. So I am curious to know. I didn't get a chance to talk to Peyton Reed, but I'm curious to know from the director's perspective, was that intentional at all? Or was that just a coincidence? But yeah, it would have been nice for this film to have a little bit more of an identity of its own, as you mentioned. But it was very heavy-handed with the Star Wars references for sure.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm just curious for the both of you. I don't know. We've had film around now over 100 years. How many different aspects of space do you think that we can create? I mean, we've seen the Star Wars universe. We've seen. I'm not being funny. I'm saying two things. You're absolutely right. Disney owns the IP for all the stuff that you're talking about, or the majority of the stuff. And secondly, how much more imagination can we bring to space or to a realm that people haven't sort of seen somewhere before?
Yeah.
I'm just asking. I mean, am I wrong?
It's tough, but it's not impossible because it happens still all the time. I mean, I would say like even in like Shang-Chi, I felt like the land that they went to felt new and different to me. Like it didn't feel like something I had seen before. I think there are ways to do it. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily like Peyton Reed was trying to like mimic other things. I don't necessarily think he was. I think it's just something that we kind of you probably do by accident.
Yeah, and it's outside of just the space scene design. It's even just storytelling wise, because even MODOK's storyline felt very Darth Vader-ish. Kind of how he came to be. So I don't know. It just felt the parallels were just astounding and very obvious. So anyway.
So Jamie, you saying they just lazy? That's pretty much.
And again, I'm curious to know, was it intentional? Maybe they wanted to be heavily influenced by that universe. It's possible. I'm not saying they're lazy. But
speaking of MODOK, I think he's going to be very divisive for people. In fact, I already know that he is. His appearance in the movie. I'm not going to give away all the details about this version of MODOK, but he's not the Patton Oswalt version from the Hulu series. So if you're going in there expecting that, then you're going to be disappointed. But then again, in the comics, there are many different versions of MODOK. You got MODOK who's the killer. You got MODOK who's the super brain, and you got MODOK who is, a bit of comic relief. So there are many different versions of MODOK. I just like the fact that the character's in there because he's one of my favorite characters in Marvel. So Jamie, any final thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? Where do you think things go from here with Kang, and curiously with Ant-Man? Because I don't know like if this is going to be the final Ant-Man movie. It kind of, if it is, it's kind of disappointing that to me he feels like he's a bit of a passenger in his own story a little bit because there's so many characters in this one. But where do you think both of
Yeah.
these characters go from here?
Yeah, you're right. He does feel like a passenger in his own story. I mean, it feels like they're kind of even setting up Cassie to be sort of
Mm,
the next um protagonist in this story. I don't I mean, I want them to bring the humor back because this film felt very uneven as far as that goes. I feel like they were trying to be very serious, but then they try to keep the comedy in there as well. And of course, I'm not going to reveal the spoilers, but I really love the end credit scenes and
right.
very curious to see where Kang goes in those moments. But I looking at this film, I'm not sure where Ant-Man is going because
Yeah.
it doesn't really leave you on a journey to where his story goes next. It just sort of cuts you off and kind of leaves you hanging. And even the end credits don't really, there's no continuity there with the end credits to let you know where Ant-Man's story jumps off next. So it tells you where Kang's story is going to jump off next. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. To be 100% honest with you, Ant-Man is not the most compelling and interesting of the Marvel stories for me.
Right.
So where his story goes next, it's not a high priority for me. But you know, I hope that the next film is a little bit more compelling. I hope that the storytelling is a little bit more even. I hope that they bring the humor back like they did in the first Ant-Man film, and you know, have a little bit less characters because I felt like it was a little bit all over the place. And let's not do heavy-handed IPs on other film properties and just focus on the originality of who Ant-Man is, and what Scott Lang is all about, and focus on Scott because Scott is really an interesting and really, you know, charismatic character. And I really love those moments where, you know, he's like trying to be a best-selling author, and that
Yeah.
the moments where he's in Baskin Robbins, like those were some really great highlights of the film. So yeah.
I almost feel like Scott Lang would be perfect for them to like bring back the Marvel one shots and like do like little stories with him that don't necessarily have to be part of the bigger whole. That's kind of the way I feel. I wish they'd bring those back anyway because I always like those. Tim, final thoughts?
I think Jamie kind of nailed all the ones I had. I mean, he's absolutely a passenger in his own film, and well, I don't want to spoil it, but you know the way they leave the film or leave Scott is that there's a lot of indecision and anxiety on his part, and I have no idea. This is the third film, right?
Yeah.
So this feels like it's his last film, but if it is his last film, there was not a it's not a good way to send him off at all. And I have no idea. I guess he'll show up somewhere in the universe in somebody else's film, kind of buddying up. But this was not really a good third attempt for him or for his character, I should say.
I feel like we may not see Scott again until we get to the Kang movies at the end and Secret Wars. We may not see him again all the way until then, possibly.
Man, that was a
So
really good point. I'm sorry. That is true. I didn't think about, damn, wow, that's your third movie, Scott.
yeah, it doesn't feel like the end of, it doesn't really feel like the end of a trilogy, like the end of a series, does it?
No,
Like,
it doesn't.
which is one of those problems that Marvel has to contend with. You know, you got all these little separate franchises, but as part of the bigger whole, some of them don't get to wrap up their own stories, which is, you know, it's been okay for Thor, but that's because Thor's had an extra movie. Thor's had 4 films, but most of these people, most of the characters only get 3, and then that's it. So I don't know. Maybe Ant-Man will get a fourth. Or maybe they'll spin it off into Young Avengers, and that's where we'll see Cassie, and maybe Scott will be a passenger in that film too. So who knows? Anyway, thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in to Cinema Royale. I'm Travis Thompson of PunchDrunkCritics.com. I want to thank Jamie Broadnax of Black Girl Nerds. Thank you, Jamie, for coming in. Tim Gordon of FilmGordon.com. Thank you for coming in. Everybody, I will see you again next week. Goodbye. Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.